The wind cut through Sadie Morrison's threadbare coat like 1,000 knives as she stumbled through the snow-covered pass, her fingers numb and her lungs burning with each desperate breath she dragged into her body. Behind her, somewhere in the white emptiness of the January blizzard, her stepfather Theodore would be searching, and she knew if he found her this time, she would not survive his rage. The year was 1878, and women had few options when it came to escaping violent men, but Sadie had decided that freezing to death in the Sierra Nevada mountains was preferable to spending one more night under Theodore's roof. She had fled their homestead outside Independence, California, 3 days ago when Theodore had come home drunk and angrier than she had ever seen him. Her mother had been dead for 8 months now, and without her there to absorb his fury, Sadie had become his target. The bruises on her ribs still ached from his last beating, and when she had seen him reaching for his belt that night, something inside her had finally broken. She had grabbed what little she could carry, waited until he passed out in his chair, and run into the winter darkness without looking back. The storm had caught her on the second day. She had thought she could make it to the next town, to Bishop perhaps, where she had a cousin who might take her in, but the blizzard had descended with terrifying swiftness, turning the familiar trail into a white maze where every direction looked the same. Her food had run out yesterday. The matches she had brought were useless now that everything was soaked through. She could no longer feel her feet inside her worn boots, and her vision had started to blur at the edges. Sadie knew she was dying. The thought came to her with strange clarity as she stumbled over something hidden beneath the snow and fell hard onto her hands and knees. She tried to push herself up, but her arms would not cooperate. The cold was seeping into her bones now, making her thoughts slow and heavy. She had heard that freezing was a peaceful way to die, that eventually you just fell asleep. That seemed almost welcome now compared to the alternative of Theodore finding her. She did not know how long she lay there in the snow. Time seemed to have lost all meaning. The world had narrowed to the white ground beneath her face and the howling of the wind. She thought of her mother, of the way she used to sing while making bread, of Sunday mornings before Theodore had come into their lives. Sadie was 20 years old, and she had wanted so much more than this. Somewhere in the distance, she heard something, a sound that did not belong to the storm. Voices, perhaps? Or was that just her mind playing tricks on her? She tried to lift her head but could not manage it. The darkness was creeping in at the edges of her vision now, warm and inviting despite the cold. Then there were hands on her, rolling her over, and a man's voice cutting through the wind. "Good God, she is alive. Help me get her on the horse." Sadie tried to open her eyes, but her eyelashes were frozen together. She felt herself being lifted, felt the warmth of something being wrapped around her. A horse shifted beneath her, and then she was pressed against something solid and warm, strong arms holding her steady. "Hold on," the voice said near her ear. "We are not far from the line shack. Just hold on." She wanted to tell him that she could not hold on, that she had nothing left to hold on with, but the words would not come. Instead, she let the darkness take her. Quinn Garrison had been checking the cattle in the high pastures when the storm hit. He and his ranch hands had been moving the herd to lower ground, trying to get ahead of the worst of the weather, when he had spotted something dark against the snow on the trail. At first he had thought it was a fallen deer, but as they got closer, his heart had seized in his chest. A woman. Out here in the middle of a blizzard, miles from anywhere. He had leaped from his horse and run to her, terrified that he was already too late. But when he had turned her over, he had felt the faint flutter of her pulse beneath his fingertips, had seen the shallow rise and fall of her chest. Now he rode as fast as he dared through the storm, the woman's small body cradled against him. She was frighteningly cold, her lips blue, her skin like ice beneath his touch. His ranch hand, Joe, rode beside him, leading Quinn's spare horse and shouting directions through the wind. The line shack was close, just another quarter-mile, but it felt like an eternity. When they finally reached the small cabin, Quinn practically threw himself from the saddle, carrying the woman inside while Joe tended to the horses. The shack was basic, just 4 walls and a roof, but it had a stove and wood and blankets, and right now that was all that mattered. Quinn laid the woman on the single cot and immediately began stripping off her wet clothes. There was no time for modesty when someone was dying of exposure. Her dress was frozen stiff, her undergarments soaked through. He worked quickly, his hands steady despite the urgency thrumming through his veins. Once he had her wrapped in every dry blanket they had, he turned his attention to building up the fire in the stove. Joe came in, stamping snow from his boots. "Horses are secured. How is she?" "Still breathing, but barely," Quinn said, feeding more wood into the stove. "We need to warm her up slowly. Too fast and it could kill her." Joe nodded, his weathered face grave. He was 60 if he was a day, had worked cattle longer than Quinn had been alive, and had seen his share of close calls. "I will make some hot water. If we can get some warmth into her belly, it might help." They worked in tense silence, taking turns rubbing the woman's hands and feet, trying to coax circulation back into her frozen limbs. Quinn heated stones by the fire and wrapped them in cloth, placing them carefully around her body. Slowly, painfully, slowly, some color began to return to her face. It was nearly dawn when her eyes finally fluttered open. Quinn, who had been dozing in a chair beside the cot, jerked awake at her small sound of distress. "Easy," he said softly, leaning forward. "You are safe. You are in a line shack in the Sierras. Do you understand me?" Her eyes, he saw now, were the color of honey, wide and confused and frightened. She stared at him for a long moment, then tried to sit up. "Whoa, slow down," Quinn said, gently pressing her shoulder. "You nearly froze to death out there. You need to take it easy." "Where?" she began, her voice hoarse and cracked. "Where are my clothes?" "Drying by the fire. They were soaked through. I had to get them off you, or you would have died." He saw the fear flash across her face and added quickly, "You have my word as a gentleman that I did not look at anything I did not need to see, and I did not do anything improper. I was only trying to save your life." She studied his face for a moment, then nodded slightly, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. "Thank you," she whispered. "What is your name?" Quinn asked. "And what in God's name were you doing out in that storm?" She hesitated, and he could see her weighing her options, deciding what to tell him. "Sadie," she finally said, "Sadie Morrison." "Well, Miss Morrison, I am Quinn Garrison. I own the Double G Ranch about 10 miles south of here. That is my man Joe over there." He gestured to where Joe was sleeping in a bedroll by the fire. "You are lucky we found you when we did. Another hour, and you would have been gone." Tears suddenly filled Sadie's eyes, spilling down her cheeks. Maybe that would have been better. Quinn felt something twist in his chest at her words. Now why would a young woman like you say something like that? She turned her face away from him, but not before he saw the shame and pain written there. "It does not matter. It matters if you are willing to die rather than face it," Quinn said quietly. He reached out and gently turned her face back toward him. That was when he saw the bruises. Even in the dim light of the cabin, he could see the fading yellow-green marks on her jaw, the shadow of a handprint on her throat. His jaw clenched, anger flooding through him hot and fierce. "Who did this to you?" "Please," Sadie whispered. "I cannot talk about it." "Was it a husband? A father?" Quinn pressed, though he tried to keep his voice gentle. "Stepfather," she breathed, and then she was crying in earnest, great shaking sobs that made her whole body tremble. Without thinking, Quinn gathered her into his arms, blankets and all, and held her while she wept. She clung to him like a drowning person, and he felt every sob like a physical blow to his own chest. "He will find me," she said between gasps. "He will come looking, and when he finds me, he will kill me." "No one is going to kill you," Quinn said firmly. "I promise you that. You are under my protection now, and I do not let harm come to those under my protection." She pulled back to look at him, her honey eyes searching his face. You do not even know me. Why would you make such a promise? Because it is the right thing to do, Quinn said simply, and because I can see that you are desperate and afraid, and I cannot abide a man who would beat a woman. What is your stepfather's name? Sadie hesitated again, then said, Theodore Morrison. We have a homestead outside Independence. Quinn knew the area, though he did not know the name. His ranch was south of Independence, and he did not make it into town more than once or twice a month. How old are you, Miss Morrison? 20, she said, and you? 25, Quinn replied, and right now you need to rest and recover your strength. We will be stuck here until the storm breaks anyway, and then we will figure out what to do next. Over the next 2 days as the blizzard raged outside, Sadie slowly recovered her strength. Her fingers and toes were blistered from frostbite, but Quinn did not think she would lose anything. She ate the simple food they prepared, hot beans and coffee and hardtack soaked in broth, and slowly the color returned fully to her face. Quinn found himself watching her more than he probably should. She was beautiful, even with the bruises and the exhaustion, with her dark hair that fell in waves past her shoulders and those extraordinary eyes. But it was more than her appearance that drew him. There was a strength in her, a determination that had kept her alive in that storm when most people would have simply given up and died. She told him her story in pieces, late at night when Joe was asleep, and it was just the two of them awake by the fire. How her father had died when she was 15, how her mother had married Theodore 2 years later, how he had seemed kind at first but had shown his true nature once the marriage was done. How her mother had endured his rages for 3 years before a fever took her, leaving Sadie alone with the man. I tried to leave before, she said quietly, staring into the flames, but he caught me. He said if I ever tried again, he would kill me and tell everyone I had run off with some man. No one would question it. No one would care. I care, Quinn said, and was surprised by how much he meant it. He had known this woman for only 2 days, but already he felt something for her, something protective and fierce and deeper than simple compassion. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and he saw something shift in her expression. Why? She asked. Why do you care so much? Quinn was quiet for a moment, trying to find the right words. My mother died when I was young, he finally said. Childbirth. And my father, he was a hard man, but he was never cruel. He taught me that a real man protects those who cannot protect themselves, that strength without honor is just tyranny. I built the Double G from nothing after he died, and I built it on those principles. I have a dozen men working for me, and I treat every one of them with respect. I could not call myself a man if I turned away from someone who needed help. You are a good man, Quinn Garrison, Sadie said softly. I try to be, he replied. The storm finally broke on the 3rd day. Quinn woke to sunlight streaming through the cracks in the cabin walls and went outside to find the world transformed into a landscape of white. The snow was several feet deep, but the sky was clear and blue and the temperature was already starting to rise. We should head out soon, Joe said, coming to stand beside him, before another storm rolls in. Quinn nodded, but his mind was already working on a problem. He could not simply take Sadie back to Independence and leave her there. Her stepfather would find her, and then all of this would have been for nothing. But he also could not keep her at the line shack indefinitely. When he went back inside, Sadie was awake and dressed in her now dry clothes. She looked better, though still fragile, and Quinn felt that now familiar twist in his chest at the sight of her. The storm has broken in Marino, he said. We will be heading back to my ranch today. You are coming with us. Sadie's eyes widened. I cannot impose on you like that. You are not imposing, I am offering. Quinn crouched down in front of her so they were eye level. Miss Morrison, Sadie, I meant what I said. You are under my protection now. You will come to the Double G and we will figure out what to do about your stepfather from there. I will not leave you to face him alone. "He will come for me," she said, fear creeping into her voice. "He will not just let me go." "Then he will have to go through me first," Quinn said firmly, "and I promise you, I am not a man who is easily moved." The ride to the Double G took most of the day, moving slowly through the deep snow. Sadie rode Quinn's spare horse, though he could see she was an inexperienced rider, and he kept close to her side to make sure she did not fall. They stopped frequently to rest, and by the time the ranch buildings came into view in the late afternoon, Sadie was swaying with exhaustion. The Double G was more impressive than Sadie had expected. The main house was a sprawling structure of wood and stone, and there were several outbuildings, corrals full of cattle, and a large barn. As they rode into the yard, several men came out to greet them, their faces curious when they saw Sadie. "Boys, this is Miss Sadie Morrison," Quinn said as he dismounted and moved to help Sadie down from her horse. "She will be staying with us for a while. I expect you all to treat her with respect and make her feel welcome." The men nodded, touching their hat brims. Sadie could see the questions in their eyes, but none of them asked, and she was grateful for that. Quinn led her into the house, which was warm and clean, but clearly a bachelor's domain. "It is not much," he said, almost apologetically. "I have a woman who comes in from town twice a week to cook and clean, but otherwise it is just me rattling around in here." "It is wonderful," Sadie said honestly. After 3 days in a cramped line shack and years in Theodore's grim homestead, the house seemed like a palace. Quinn showed her to a bedroom on the second floor. It was simply furnished with a bed, a dresser, and a washstand, but the mattress looked soft and the quilt was thick and warm. "This is yours for as long as you need it," Quinn said. "There is water in the pitcher, and I will have some food sent up. You should rest." "Quinn," Sadie said as he turned to leave. He looked back at her, and she felt her heart skip a beat at the kindness in his blue eyes. "Thank you for everything." "You're welcome," he said quietly. "Sleep well, Sadie." Over the next several weeks, Sadie settled into life at the Double G. She insisted on earning her keep, despite Quinn's protests, and took over much of the cooking and household work. Mrs. Chen, the woman who had been coming in to help, was delighted to have assistance and taught Sadie her methods for managing the large household. The ranch hands quickly grew accustomed to her presence. They were rough men, scarred and weathered by years of hard work, but they treated her with unfailing courtesy. Several of them, Sadie learned, had their own stories of hardship and fresh starts, and there was an unspoken understanding that everyone's past was their own business. But it was Quinn who occupied most of Sadie's thoughts. She saw him every day, of course, at meals and in passing around the ranch, but there were also the evenings when the work was done, and they would sit together in the main room of the house. Sometimes they talked, sharing stories about their lives and dreams. Sometimes they simply sat in comfortable silence while Quinn worked on his accounts and Sadie mended or sewed. She found herself watching him when he did not know she was looking, admiring the way his hands moved with sure competence, the way he treated his men with respect, the way he was endlessly patient with the animals. He was so different from Theodore, so different from any man she had ever known. With Quinn, she felt safe for the first time in years. For his part, Quinn was trying very hard not to fall in love with Sadie Morrison. He knew it was foolish, knew she was vulnerable and grateful, and that any feeling she might have for him could be tangled up in those emotions. But every day it became harder to maintain his distance. Every time she smiled at him, every time he heard her laugh at something one of the men said, every time he came in from a hard day's work to find her making dinner in his kitchen, he felt his resolve weaken a little more. It was Joe who finally called him on it. They were out checking fence lines 6 weeks after they had found Sadie, and the old ranch hand gave Quinn a knowing look. "You have got it bad for that girl," Joe said bluntly. Quinn sighed. "Is it that obvious?" "To anyone with eyes," Joe replied. "Question is, what are you going to do about it?" "Nothing," Quinn said firmly. "She has been through hell. The last thing she needs is me pushing my feelings on her." "Did it occur to you that maybe she feels the same way?" Joe asked. "That girl looks at you like you hung the moon, boss." "She is grateful, that is all," Quinn said, though his heart leaped at Joe's words. I saved her life. She would feel that way about anyone. Joe snorted. You are a fool if you believe that, but it is your business, I suppose. Just do not wait so long that you lose your chance. That conversation haunted Quinn over the next several days. He found himself watching Sadie even more closely, trying to discern her feelings. Did she look at him differently than she looked at the other men? Was there something more than gratitude in her eyes when they met his? The answer came one evening in early March. Quinn was working in his study trying to make sense of his accounts when Sadie appeared in the doorway with a cup of coffee. I thought you might need this, she said, setting the cup on his desk. Thank you, Quinn said, looking up at her. She was wearing a simple dress that Mrs. Chen had given her, and her hair was loose around her shoulders. In the lamplight, she was so beautiful, it made his chest ache. Quinn, Sadie said hesitantly, can I ask you something? Of course, he said. She was quiet for a moment, seeming to gather her courage. Why have you never married? The question surprised him. I suppose I never found the right woman, he said carefully, and I have been busy building up the ranch. Why do you ask? I was just wondering, Sadie said, but her cheeks had colored. You would make a good husband. You are kind and honorable and hardworking. Any woman would be lucky to have you. Quinn's heart was pounding now. Is that what you think? Yes, she said softly, meeting his eyes. I know I have no right to say such things, that I'm here only because of your charity, but I cannot help but think about it, about what it would be like to be married to a man like you. Quinn stood slowly, coming around the desk to stand in front of her. Sadie, he said quietly, you are not here because of charity. You are here because I want you here. Because from the moment I found you in that storm, I have not been able to stop thinking about you. Her eyes widened. Truly? Truly, he said. I have been trying not to say anything because I did not want to take advantage of your situation, but God help me, I am falling in love with you. Sadie's breath caught. I thought I was imagining it, she whispered. I thought it was just me who felt this way. You have feelings for me, Quinn asked, hardly daring to believe it. Yes, she said. And then she was in his arms, and he was kissing her like she was air, and he had been drowning. She kissed him back just as fiercely, her hands fisting in his shirt, and Quinn felt something inside him that he had not even known was frozen start to thaw. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Quinn rested his forehead against hers. We should do this properly, he said. I should court you, take you to dances in town, give you time to be sure. I am sure, Sadie said firmly. I have never been more sure of anything in my life. You saved me, Quinn, not just from the storm, but from everything. You showed me what a good man looks like, what a real home feels like. I do not need time to know that I love you. Marry me, Quinn said, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. I know it is fast. I know people will talk, but I do not care. Marry me, Sadie. Let me spend the rest of my life making you happy. Yes, Sadie breathed, tears streaming down her face now. Yes, yes, yes. They were married 3 weeks later in Independence, with the ranch hands as witnesses and the local minister presiding. It was a small ceremony, but to Sadie it was perfect. She wore a dress that Mrs. Chen had helped her make, pale blue with white lace, and Quinn wore his best suit. When he looked at her as she walked toward him, his eyes were bright with emotion. The only shadow on the day was the constant awareness that Theodore was still out there. Sadie had not seen him since her flight into the storm, but she knew he had not given up. Quinn had made inquiries and learned that Theodore had indeed been searching for her, had even come to the Double G once asking if anyone had seen his missing stepdaughter. Quinn's men had sent him away with a warning not to come back, but they all knew it was not over. Quinn had tried to convince Sadie to go to the law, but she had refused. It would be my word against his, she had said bitterly. A man's right to discipline his household is protected, especially when it comes to unmarried women under his care. The law would not help me, Quinn. It might even force me to go back to him. So Quinn had taken matters into his own hands. He had visited Theodore's homestead with Joe and two of his largest ranch hands. He had told Theodore in no uncertain terms that Sadie was now his wife, that she was under his protection, and that if Theodore ever came near her again, he would regret it. Theodore had blustered and threatened, but faced with 4 armed men on his property, he had ultimately backed down. But Quinn knew that men like Theodore did not give up easily. He made sure that Sadie was never alone at the ranch, that someone was always nearby if he had to be away. He taught her to shoot over her protests because he wanted her to be able to defend herself if necessary. As spring turned to summer, however, the fear began to recede. Theodore made no more appearances, and slowly Sadie began to relax, to truly believe that she was safe. Her marriage to Quinn was everything she had never dared to dream of. He was gentle with her, patient with her fears and her nightmares, endlessly affectionate in a way that made her feel cherished. They were lying in bed one warm June night when Sadie said, "I never thought I could be this happy." Quinn pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her hair. "Neither did I. I thought I would spend my life alone on this ranch, married to my work, and then you appeared like some kind of miracle." "A half-frozen miracle," Sadie said with a small laugh. "The best kind," Quinn replied. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "I have been thinking about something." "What is that?" Sadie asked. "Children," Quinn said. "I know it might be too soon to talk about it, but I want you to know that I hope we will have them someday. A whole house full of them, if you're willing." Sadie felt her heart swell. "I would like that," she said softly. "I always wanted a family, a real family. With you, I think I could finally have that." "You will have it," Quinn promised. "I swear to you, Sadie, I will spend every day of my life making sure you know you are loved and safe and valued. You will never have to run again." She kissed him then, pouring all her love and gratitude and hope into it. When they finally fell asleep, wrapped in each other's arms, Sadie dreamed not of blizzards and fear, but of a future full of light and warmth and love. The confrontation with Theodore came on a hot day in July. Sadie was in the kitchen making preserves when one of the ranch hands, a young man named Tom, burst through the door. "Mrs. Garrison, you need to come quick. There is a man at the gate claiming to be your stepfather. The boss is talking to him, but it is getting heated." Sadie's blood ran cold. She wiped her hands on her apron and followed Tom outside, her heart pounding. She could see Quinn standing by the main gate, his stance tense and aggressive. Facing him was Theodore, looking older and meaner than she remembered. "Sadie," Theodore shouted when he saw her, "you get over here right now. You're coming home with me where you belong." "I am home," Sadie called back, moving to stand beside Quinn. He immediately put an arm around her waist, pulling her close to his side. "This is where I belong now." "You are my daughter," Theodore snarled. "The law says you are under my authority until you are 21. "She is not your daughter. She is your stepdaughter," Quinn said coldly, "and she is 20 years old and married. She is under no one's authority but her own and her husband's by choice. You have no claim on her." "She is my property," Theodore shouted. "She owes me for the years I fed and housed her." "You beat her," Quinn said, his voice deadly quiet now. "You terrorized her so badly that she was willing to die in a blizzard rather than stay with you another day. You are lucky I do not kill you where you stand." Theodore's face was red with rage. "You have no proof of anything. It is her word against mine, and no one will believe the lies of an ungrateful girl." "I believe her," Quinn said, "and that is all that matters. Now get off my land before I have you removed." "This is not over," Theodore hissed. "You cannot keep her from me forever." "Watch me," Quinn said. He turned to his ranch hands who had gathered around at the commotion. "Escort Mr. Morrison off the property. If he resists, you have my permission to use force." Theodore was many things, but he was not a complete fool. Faced with a dozen armed ranch hands, he had no choice but to retreat. But as he was escorted away, he shot Sadie a look of such pure hatred that she felt her blood freeze. "He will come back," she whispered to Quinn. "He will not let this go." Then we will deal with it, Quinn said firmly. But Sadie could see the worry in his eyes, and she knew he was thinking the same thing she was. Theodore was not a man who accepted defeat, and he would not stop until he got what he wanted or was stopped permanently. The attack came a week later, in the middle of the night. Sadie woke to the sound of breaking glass and the smell of smoke. She sat up with a gasp to find flames licking up the curtains of the bedroom window. "Quinn!" she screamed, shaking him awake. "Fire!" Quinn was up in an instant, grabbing Sadie's hand and pulling her toward the door. But when he opened it, they were met with a wall of flames. The house was burning, and burning fast. "The window," Quinn said, pulling her back. He wrapped a blanket around his fist and punched out the remaining glass, then turned to Sadie. "Can you climb down?" "I think so," Sadie said, though she was shaking with fear. "I will go first and catch you," Quinn said. He swung himself out the window and dropped to the ground, landing in a crouch. "Come on, Sadie, I've got you." Sadie climbed out onto the sill, her nightgown tangling around her legs. The drop looked terrifyingly far, but the flames were getting closer, the heat intense against her back. She jumped, and Quinn caught her, his arms strong and sure. All around them, the ranch was in chaos. The men were running with buckets, trying to put out the flames, but it was clear the house was lost. Quinn pulled Sadie away to safety, wrapping her in his arms as they watched their home burn. "It was Theodore," Sadie said, tears streaming down her face. "It had to be. He did this." "I know," Quinn said, his voice tight with fury. "But he made a mistake. He did not kill us, and now he has committed a crime that the law cannot ignore. Arson is serious business, Sadie. He will hang for this." They found evidence the next morning. Cans of kerosene hidden in the bushes near the house, boot prints in the dirt that led away from the ranch toward Independence. Quinn rode into town with Joe and several of his men, and they went straight to the sheriff. The sheriff, a grizzled man named Davis, listened to their story with a grim expression. "I know Theodore Morrison," he said. "He has got a reputation for being mean when he has been drinking. But arson is a hanging offense. Are you sure it was him?" "Who else would it be?" Quinn asked. "He threatened my wife just last week. He said it was not over. And now my house burns down in the middle of the night. That is not a coincidence." Sheriff Davis nodded. "I will ride out to his place and bring him in for questioning. If he did this, he will face justice." But when the sheriff and his deputies arrived at Theodore's homestead, they found it abandoned. Theodore was gone, had clearly fled in the night, taking what little he could carry. A manhunt was organized, but the trail went cold in the mountains. Theodore Morrison had disappeared. For weeks, Sadie lived in fear, jumping at every sound, terrified that Theodore would return to finish what he had started. Quinn was equally vigilant, keeping armed men on watch at all hours, never letting Sadie out of his sight unless absolutely necessary. They had moved into one of the outbuildings while the main house was being rebuilt. It was cramped and uncomfortable, but Sadie found she did not care. As long as she had Quinn, she could endure anything. It was early September when word finally came. A trapper found a body in the high country, frozen and half-eaten by animals. The sheriff rode up to identify it, and when he came back to the ranch, his expression was somber. "It is Theodore Morrison," he told Quinn and Sadie. "Looks like he tried to cross a pass in the early snow and did not make it. He has been dead for at least a month, maybe more." Sadie felt a complex wash of emotions, relief certainly, that the threat was finally over, but also a strange grief for the man her stepfather might have been if he had not been consumed by anger and cruelty. And underneath it all, a profound sense of freedom. She was finally, truly safe. "It is over," Quinn said quietly, pulling her into his arms. "He cannot hurt you anymore." "It is over," Sadie repeated, and for the first time in her life, she truly believed it. The house was finished by late October, larger and more beautiful than the original. Quinn had spared no expense in the rebuilding, and the result was a home that Sadie loved from the moment she walked through the door. There was a parlor with large windows that let in the light, a kitchen that was a joy to work in, and upstairs a nursery that Quinn had insisted on including. For the future, he had said when he showed it to her, and Sadie had felt her heart overflow with love for this man who gave her everything she had ever wanted. That future came sooner than they expected. By Christmas, Sadie was certain she was pregnant. She told Quinn on Christmas morning, watching his face transform with joy when he understood what she was saying. "A baby," he breathed, pulling her into his arms. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Sadie asked, though she could already see the answer in his eyes. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Quinn said. He kissed her deeply, then dropped to his knees and pressed his face against her still flat belly. "Hello in there, little one. This is your father. I cannot wait to meet you." Sadie ran her fingers through his hair, tears of joy running down her face. A year ago, she had been running for her life through a blizzard, certain she would die alone and afraid. Now she was standing in a beautiful home with a man who loved her, carrying his child, with a future that stretched out before them bright and full of promise. The baby came in late July of 1879, a hot summer evening when the air was thick and heavy. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Quinn, pacing in the hall outside their bedroom, feared he would lose both Sadie and the child. But finally, as the sun was setting, he heard the thin wail of a baby, and then Mrs. Chen was opening the door with a smile on her face. "You have a son, Mr. Garrison, a healthy boy, and your wife is tired but well." Quinn nearly collapsed with relief. He went into the bedroom to find Sadie pale and exhausted but smiling, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. When she looked up at him, her eyes were shining. "Meet your son," she said softly. Quinn approached carefully, as if afraid he might break something. When he looked down at the baby's face, red and wrinkled and perfect, he felt his heart crack open in a way he had not known was possible. "He is beautiful," Quinn whispered. "What should we name him?" "I was thinking James," Sadie said, "after your father." Quinn looked at her in surprise. He had told her about his father, about the lessons he had learned and the man he had tried to become in his father's image. "You would do that?" "Of course," Sadie said. "Your father raised a good man, Quinn. That is the best legacy anyone could have. I want our son to carry that forward." So James Garrison came into the world, and with him came a new chapter in their lives. Quinn discovered that he loved being a father almost as much as he loved being a husband. He would hold James for hours, talking to him about the ranch and the cattle and all the things they would do together when James was older. Sadie watched them together with a full heart. This was the family she had dreamed of, the life she had never thought she would have. Every day was a gift, every moment precious. The years flowed by like water. James grew into a sturdy boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's determination. When he was 3, Sadie gave birth to twin girls, Emma and Lucy, who turned the household upside down with their energy and laughter. 2 years after that came another son, Henry, quieter than his siblings but with a sharp mind and a kind heart. Quinn expanded the Double G, buying up neighboring properties until it was one of the largest ranches in the valley. But no matter how successful he became, he never forgot where he had come from, and he never stopped treating his workers with respect and fairness. The ranch became known not just for its quality cattle, but for being a place where men could get a fresh start, where a hard past did not define your future. Sadie became a pillar of the independence community. She organized church socials and school fundraisers, took in women who had nowhere else to go, and became known for her compassion and strength. There were those who remembered that she had once been Theodore Morrison's stepdaughter, that she had fled his home under scandalous circumstances, but no one spoke of it. The woman she had become commanded too much respect for that. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Quinn took Sadie on a ride up into the mountains, just the two of them. They rode to the place where he had found her, that spot on the trail where she had fallen in the snow and nearly died. "Why did you bring me here?" Sadie asked as they stood looking at the view. "Because this is where our story began," Quinn said, taking her hand. 10 years ago, I found you here, and my life changed forever. I wanted to come back and remember what a gift that was." Sadie leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. "I was so afraid that day," she said quietly. "I thought I was dying, and part of me wanted to. I could not see any way forward that did not involve pain." "And now?" Quinn asked. "Now I cannot imagine ever wanting to leave this life," Sadie said. "You gave me everything, Quinn. A home, a family, safety, love. You gave me a reason to live." "You gave me just as much," Quinn said. "Before you, I was just going through the motions, building the ranch, working every day, but for what? I had no one to share it with. No reason for any of it beyond simple survival. You made it all mean something." They stood there for a long time, holding each other and looking out over the valley. In the distance, they could see the Double G, the house and outbuildings, the cattle grazing in the pastures. It was a good life they had built, hard-won and precious. As they rode back down the mountain, Sadie thought about the girl she had been, desperate and broken and running through a blizzard. That girl was gone now, replaced by a woman who knew her own strength, who had learned that love and safety were not just dreams but things that could be real and lasting. The years continued to pass. James grew into a young man who was his father's pride, learning the ranch business with the same dedication Quinn had shown. The twins were wild and spirited, keeping everyone on their toes, while Henry developed a passion for books and learning that had both his parents encouraging him to consider going east for university. Quinn and Sadie grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. They had weathered storms, both literal and figurative, had built something lasting and good from the ashes of Sadie's painful past. On quiet evenings, they would sit together on the porch of their house, watching the sunset and counting their blessings. "Do you ever think about what might have happened if we had not found you that day?" Quinn asked one such evening. They were in their 40s now, their children mostly grown, their hair touched with gray. "Sometimes," Sadie admitted, "but not often. That girl who ran into the blizzard feels like someone else now, someone from a different life." "She was brave," Quinn said. "She chose possible death over certain misery. That takes courage." "Or desperation," Sadie said with a small smile. "But I am glad she made that choice, because it led me to you." "To us," Quinn corrected, gesturing at the ranch spread out before them, at the lights in the windows where their children were finishing dinner, at the life they had built together. "To us," Sadie agreed. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Somewhere in the distance, a cow lowed, and closer by they could hear their daughters laughing about something. These were the sounds of home, of family, of a life well lived. Quinn reached over and took Sadie's hand, threading their fingers together. After all these years, the touch still sent a thrill through her, still made her feel safe and cherished and loved. "I would do it all again," Quinn said quietly. "Every moment, every challenge, every fear. I would do it all again to have this life with you." "So would I," Sadie said, squeezing his hand. In a heartbeat. As darkness fell and the stars began to appear overhead, they rose and went inside together, into the warm house full of light and love and laughter. The blizzard was long past. The fear and pain, nothing but distant memories. What remained was this: a love forged in hardship and tested by time, a family built on a foundation of respect and devotion, a home that was a haven for all who entered. Sadie Morrison Garrison had run into a blizzard to escape death and had found life instead. She had been saved by a cowboy with a good heart and had saved him in return, giving him the family and purpose he had been missing. Together they had created something beautiful and lasting, a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. The years continued their steady march, bringing with them all the joys and sorrows that life holds. When James married a school teacher from Bishop and brought his own children to the Double G, Quinn and Sadie became grandparents, marveling at how quickly time had passed. Emma and Lucy both found good men who loved them fiercely, and Henry did indeed go east to university, returning with a degree and a determination to bring better education to rural California. Through it all, Quinn and Sadie remained each other's constant. They danced at their children's weddings, held each other through the loss of beloved friends, celebrated successes, and weathered disappointment side by side. Their love, which had begun in crisis and been forged in adversity, had matured into something deep and unshakable, a partnership that was as much about friendship and respect as it was about passion. On their 25th anniversary, their children organized a celebration at the ranch. It seemed like half the county came, all of them wanting to honor the couple who had become symbols of what love and hard work could achieve. There was music and dancing, food and laughter, and Quinn and Sadie stood in the middle of it all, amazed at what they had built. "Did you ever imagine this?" Sadie asked Quinn as they danced together under the stars. "All of this?" "Never," Quinn admitted. "When I was a young man running this ranch alone, I could not have dreamed this. But from the moment I found you, I started to hope for it." "I love you," Sadie said simply. "I have loved you since those days in the line shack when you were so gentle and careful with me. You made me believe that good men existed, that love did not have to hurt." "I love you too," Quinn said, pulling her closer. "You have made every day of my life better just by being in it. I am the luckiest man alive." They danced until late in the evening, surrounded by their family and friends, celebrating not just their anniversary, but the life they had built together. It was a life that had started in the most unlikely way, with a desperate woman in a blizzard and a cowboy who refused to turn away from someone in need. As they grew older, Quinn and Sadie made a point of sharing their story with their grandchildren. They wanted them to understand that life could be hard, that sometimes you had to run through blizzards to find safety, but that love and courage could see you through anything. They told them about the line shack and the fear and the moment when they first admitted they loved each other. They told them about Theodore, not to frighten them, but to teach them that some people are broken in ways that cannot be fixed, and that protecting yourself from such people is not cowardice, but wisdom. The grandchildren listened with wide eyes, hardly able to imagine their gentle grandmother as a desperate young woman fleeing through the snow, or their strong grandfather as the cowboy who had saved her. But they understood the lesson underneath. That family was everything. That love was worth fighting for, and that home was not just a place, but the people you chose to be with. Quinn's health began to fail when he was in his 60s. It started small, a persistent cough that would not go away, then a weakness in his limbs that made the ranch work increasingly difficult. He fought it as long as he could, stubborn as always, but eventually he had to admit that his days of riding the range were over. James took over the day-to-day operations of the Double G, and though it pained Quinn to step back, he was proud of the man his son had become. James ran the ranch with the same principles Quinn had instilled in him, treating the workers fairly and building on the reputation his father had established. Sadie nursed Quinn through his decline with the same fierce devotion she had shown throughout their marriage. She was by his side every day, reading to him when he could not sleep, holding his hand when the pain was bad, telling him stories of their life together to keep his spirits up. "I am not ready to leave you," Quinn said one evening as they sat together in their bedroom. He was in bed now more often than not, his once strong body frail and failing. "Then do not," Sadie said, though tears were streaming down her face. "Stay with me. We have more life to live yet." "I wish I could," Quinn said. He reached up and touched her face, his hand trembling. "But if I do have to go, you need to know something. These years with you have been the best of my life. You were worth everything, Sadie. Every moment, every struggle, every fear. You were worth it all." "So were you," Sadie whispered. "You saved me, Quinn. In every way a person can be saved. I would not be here without you. I would not be this person without you." "You would," Quinn said with certainty. "You were always strong, always brave. I just gave you a place where you could be those things safely. But they were in you all along." He died peacefully a few weeks later, with Sadie holding his hand and all his children gathered around. His last words were to Sadie, too soft for anyone else to hear, but she knew what he said. "I love you. Always. Always," she whispered back. The grief was crushing at first. Sadie had spent 30 years with Quinn, had built her entire adult life around him, and his absence left a hole that seemed impossible to fill. But she was not alone. Her children rallied around her, and her grandchildren filled the house with noise and life, reminding her that Quinn's legacy lived on in them. She lived for another 15 years after Quinn's death, watching her great-grandchildren be born, seeing the Double G continue to prosper under James's management. She stayed active in the community, continuing her charitable work, and became known as the matriarch of the family, the keeper of stories and wisdom. When she finally passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 75, the entire county mourned. Her funeral was attended by hundreds of people, all of whom had been touched by her kindness and strength. She was buried beside Quinn on a hill overlooking the Double G, under a sky as blue and clear as the day he had first found her in the snow. The Double G continued for generations, passed down through the family, each generation adding their own chapter to the story. But the tale that was told most often, that became part of the ranch's very identity, was the story of Quinn and Sadie, of how she had walked through a blizzard to escape her stepfather, of how a cowboy had found her near death on the trail, of how that desperate moment had led to a love that lasted a lifetime. It became a story about courage and kindness, about the power of love to heal even the deepest wounds. It was a reminder that even in the darkest moments, when death seems certain and hope is lost, salvation can come from the most unexpected places. And it was proof that sometimes the most beautiful things in life grow from the harshest conditions, like flowers blooming in the snow. The descendants of Quinn and Sadie Garrison carried their story forward, telling it to each new generation. They pointed to the place in the mountains where it all began, where a desperate woman had fallen in the snow and a good man had refused to leave her. They showed their children the house that had been built and rebuilt, the symbol of the life their ancestors had created from nothing. And on cold winter nights, when the wind howled through the passes and snow fell thick and fast, they remembered. They remembered that love could conquer fear, that kindness could save lives, that home was not where you came from, but where you were welcomed and valued and safe. They remembered Quinn and Sadie, and they understood that their story was not just history, but a living legacy, a testament to the enduring power of human connection and the courage it takes to build a life worth living. The blizzard had been terrible, and the fear had been real, but from that darkness had come light. From that desperate flight had come a home. From that near death had come a life more full and beautiful than either Quinn or Sadie could have imagined on that day when he found her on the trail. It was, in the end, a story about hope, about how even when everything seems lost, even when you are stumbling through a blizzard with death at your heels and no future in sight, salvation might be just around the corner. About how a single act of compassion can change everything, can set in motion a chain of events that ripples forward through time, touching lives for generations. The Double G still stood, a testament to what Quinn and Sadie had built together. The cattle still grazed in the pastures, the ranch hands still worked the land, the family still gathered for holidays and celebrations. And on the mantel in the main house, in a place of honor, sat a photograph taken on Quinn and Sadie's 50th anniversary, just a few years before Quinn's death. In it, they sat together on the porch of their home, his arm around her shoulders, both of them smiling at the camera. They were old in the photograph, their faces lined with years of hard work and laughter and tears, but their eyes were bright, and the love between them was as evident as it had been the day they married. Below the photograph was a small plaque placed there by their children after Sadie's death. It read, "She walked through a blizzard to escape her past. He found her near death on the trail. Together, They built a legacy of love that will endure forever. And it did endure. Through changing times and new challenges, through wars and depressions and all the upheavals that the 20th and 21st centuries would bring, the story of Quinn and Sadie remained. It was told at family gatherings and written down in journals, passed from parent to child like a precious heirloom. Because it was more than just a love story, though it was certainly that. It was a reminder of what truly mattered in life. Not wealth or status or power, but love and family and home. Not where you came from, but where you were going. Not the past that pursued you, but the future you chose to build. Sadie Morrison had run into a blizzard expecting to die. Instead, she had lived, truly lived, in ways she had never imagined possible. Quinn Garrison had been building a ranch and a business, but had been missing the heart of it all until he found her. Together, they had created something that transcended their individual stories, something that proved that even from the darkest beginnings, the most beautiful endings could emerge. The mountains where it all began still stood, eternal and unchanging. The snow still fell in winter, and the passes could still be treacherous. But the trail where Quinn had found Sadie was no longer a place of fear and death. It had become something else entirely, a place of beginning, a place where two lives had intersected and changed course, a place where love had been born from compassion and courage. And so the story lived on, as the best stories always do, reminding each new generation that kindness matters, that love is possible even after terrible pain, and that sometimes the worst moments of our lives are the doorways to the best. That sometimes you have to walk through the blizzard to find the cowboy waiting on the other side, ready to save you and be saved in return, ready to build a life together that neither of you could have built alone. It was a story about survival and salvation, about finding home when you least expect it, about love that endures beyond death itself. And it all started with a desperate woman, a fierce blizzard, and a cowboy who refused to ride past someone in need.